Sienna Clarke was up to her elbows in suds when the bell above the door chimed and Chaos walked in on 4 legs, dragging behind him a man who looked like he belonged on the cover of a luxury watch ad. "Easy, Thor," the man called, barely keeping hold of the leash as a massive Bernese mountain dog barreled forward, knocking over a bucket of clean towels. Sienna blinked as the dog lunged affectionately toward her, tail wagging like a windmill. "Whoa, big guy," she laughed, bracing herself as Thor planted 2 giant paws on the grooming counter and licked her cheek. The man jogged over, slightly out of breath, tugging the leash back. "Sorry about that." "He thinks everyone's his best friend." Sienna wiped her face with her sleeve and grinned. "Well, he's definitely enthusiastic. You must be new. I don't think we've met." His eyes were sharp blue, like summer sky after a storm, clean cut but not stuffy. He wore a navy button-up rolled at the sleeves, jeans that looked way too expensive to have dog hair all over them, and shoes that had probably never touched a public sidewalk. "I'm York Barrett," he said, extending a hand. His grip was firm, warm. "Just moved into the house on Thornberry Lane. Oh, the mansion at the end of the street. I'm Sienna. I run the place now," she said, motioning around the busy grooming shop. "Took over last month when my aunt retired." "Welcome to K9 Kingdom." His eyes roamed the shop, colorful leashes on display, barking in the back, the scent of lavender shampoo in the air before returning to her. "It's charming, charming, that word again." Everyone said it about the shop, some meant it as a compliment, others not so much. York crouched to unclip Thor's leash and Sienna caught a glimpse of a sleek black car parked outside, not just sleek. A Bentley, of course he drives a Bentley. "Thor's pretty overdue for a grooming," York admitted, brushing a hand over the dog's tangled coat. "We were in the city before this. I used to send him to a place in Manhattan." "Well," Sienna said, reaching for her grooming tools, "he's in good hands now." He watched her work, arms crossed, clearly used to being in control. She didn't flinch under his gaze. She dealt with tougher critics and more difficult dogs. 10 minutes in, York surprised her by kneeling beside Thor and helping keep him calm. "You always been into this kind of thing?" he asked. "Dogs? Yeah, always. I grew up here. My aunt built this whole place from scratch. I worked here in high school, then came back when she said she wanted to retire." He nodded slowly. "That's rare. People usually run from small towns, not back to them." Sienna shot him a look. "And yet you left the city for Maplewood." "Touché," he said, his smile crooked and annoyingly charming. They didn't talk much after that. York took a phone call outside while Sienna finished Thor's cut. When he came back in, she handed him a bag of gourmet treats. "On the house," she said. "First-time customer." He accepted the bag with a nod. "Thanks." "Thor looks great." Sienna scratched the dog behind the ears. "He's a sweetheart. You should bring him in more often." York's gaze lingered a second too long. "I just might." When he left, the air felt a little quieter. Sienna shook her head and got back to work. Over the next 2 weeks, York came in 3 more times. Once for a nail trim, another for a paw pad balm, then just to drop by and say hi. Each time he stayed longer, talked more, asked questions about her life, her plans for the shop. He always wore the same watch, platinum, probably custom, and once he brought Thor in wearing a cashmere dog sweater. Sienna had to stop herself from laughing. "You do realize dogs don't care about fashion, right?" "I do," York said, not missing a beat. "But I also know this one gets cold. And I like spoiling him." She raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess, you spoil everyone in your life." His response was quiet. "Not everyone, just the ones that matter." It was the first time she saw something flicker behind his smile, something tired, guarded. Like there was a whole life he didn't talk about. But then he changed the subject and she didn't press. Until a Saturday morning when he walked in carrying coffee not just for himself, but for her. Her name was scribbled on the cup in thick black marker. "You remembered my order?" she asked, surprised. "You said it once last week. I have a decent memory." Their fingers brushed as she took the cup. That was the moment. She couldn't explain it, but something shifted. The way he looked at her, it wasn't casual anymore. It wasn't polite. It was focused. Intent, and she felt it too, the warmth in her chest, the way her smile came too easily around him, how she started looking forward to his visits more than she wanted to admit. But Sienna reminded herself it was nothing. Just a rich guy bored with small-town life, flirting with the local dog groomer for fun. That idea shattered 3 days later when a woman in a designer pantsuit walked in, heels clicking across the tile. "I'm looking for Mr. Barrett," she said crisply. His assistant said he was here. Sienna froze. "He's not in right now. Did you want to leave a message?" The woman narrowed her eyes. "Tell him Madison from Barrett Enterprises stopped by. We need him back in Manhattan this weekend." Sienna's stomach dropped. Barrett Enterprises. She waited until the woman left before she locked herself in the back room. Her hands shook slightly as she pulled out her phone and searched. York Barrett, CEO of Barrett Enterprises. Real estate tycoon. Net worth. Several $100 million. Her breath caught. He wasn't just rich. He was a millionaire, and he hadn't told her. Later that afternoon, as she brushed out a golden retriever, York came in like nothing had happened, like her world hadn't just tilted on its axis. "You're late," she said, not looking up. He stopped. "Is something wrong?" "Oh, I don't know," she said, voice tight. "Maybe just the fact I found out you're a millionaire from your assistant instead of you." The silence stretched. "I didn't want you to treat me differently," he said finally. "I liked the way you looked at me here. Like I was just a guy with a dog." "Well, congratulations," she snapped. "Now I know exactly who you are." She didn't wait for him to respond. She turned and walked into the back, and for the first time since she'd met him, York didn't follow. The wind was sharp the next morning, cutting through Maplewood with the bite of early spring. Sienna unlocked the front door of the shop without glancing at the street. She didn't need to look to know the Bentley wasn't there. The shop was busy. 3 dogs on the schedule before noon, a delivery arriving by midday, but her movements were too precise, too quiet. Even the radio felt louder than usual as she shampooed a wiry terrier who wasn't thrilled to be there. She didn't speak unless she had to, didn't laugh. Didn't reach for her phone once. By late afternoon, while wiping down the counter, she noticed the silence again. It wasn't just about York, it was the way she'd let herself become vulnerable. She didn't regret finding out who he really was. What she regretted was letting herself care before she knew the full story. The bell chimed just after closing. She didn't look up. "We're closed." "I know. I waited until you were done." York stood just inside the door, his expression unreadable. He wasn't dressed like usual, no crisp button-up. Just a plain gray sweater and dark jeans, his hair slightly disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. She crossed her arms. "Did your assistant give you permission to be here?" "That wasn't fair," he said. "Neither was keeping things from you." "But I'd like to explain." She grabbed her bag but didn't move toward the door. "You had plenty of chances before yesterday." "I didn't think it mattered at first," he said. "I thought I could come here, be around someone who didn't care about the name or the money. I didn't expect to care this much." He paused. "You made it impossible not to." Sienna's shoulders tensed. "You think a few compliments are going to fix this?" "No," he said, stepping closer. "I think the truth might." She stayed still. "My parents built Barrett Enterprises. I didn't choose it, I inherited it. I spent most of my life trying to outrun the machine they created. It never felt like mine. I came to Maplewood because I needed space, and then I found you." Her voice was quiet. "You let me believe you were just another guy with a dog. Because I wanted to be. Around you I was." She looked at him then, really looked. There was no arrogance in his eyes, just something raw and oddly unsure. It disarmed her more than any apology could have. "Why now?" she asked. "Why tell me this after I had to find out from someone else?" "Because I didn't think I had to explain until I saw your face yesterday. And when you walked away, I realized I already lost something I hadn't even let myself want." Sienna's throat tightened. "You think saying that makes it easier?" "No," York said, his voice low, "but not saying it would have made it worse." She didn't answer. Instead, she walked past him, flipped off the lights, and stepped onto the sidewalk. He followed without a word. Outside, the last of the sun lit the tops of the trees, casting long shadows across the pavement. She turned to him. "You don't get to rewrite this like it's some story where you're the hero," she said. "You lied by omission. And I'm not some subplot you get to figure out later." "I know," he said, "but I'm not giving up on this, on you." She met his eyes. "Then you're going to have to prove it," he nodded once, solemn. "I will." As she walked away, he didn't try to stop her. But the way he looked at her, as if he'd just been handed a second chance he wasn't sure he deserved, lingered with her long after she'd turned the corner. The next morning, she found a large box on the shop's back step. No note, no branding. Just a sealed package with her name written in neat block letters. Inside was a custom leather grooming apron, embossed with her initials. Underneath, a sleek set of stainless steel grooming tools arranged in a velvet-lined case. The exact set she'd once pointed out in a catalog and immediately dismissed because of the price. She stared at the contents for a long moment before closing the box and locking it away in the supply room. That afternoon, an older woman named Doris came in with her dachshund, Rufus, who had a habit of growling at anyone under the age of 40. Sienna coaxed him into the bath and kept her hands steady even when he bared his teeth. She did her job. She smiled when she had to, but her mind kept drifting. 2 days passed before she saw York again. He didn't bring Thor. He didn't bring coffee. He brought a clipboard. "I want to sponsor the Maplewood Dog Fair," he said without preamble, "but I know it's your event, so I'm not going to do anything unless you say yes." She blinked. "How do you even know about the fair? I heard you talking to Mrs. Langston last week. You said the funding fell through and you weren't sure it could still happen." Sienna folded her arms. "You want me to believe this is about charity?" "No," he said. "It's about showing up." "You said I'd have to prove it, so I'm starting here." She hesitated. "Why do you even care?" "Because it matters to you, and that's enough for me." She studied him. "Fine," she said at last. "But if you try to turn this into some press stunt, I won't," he said. "You have my word." She didn't smile, but she didn't walk away either. Later that evening, she stayed late at the shop, filing paperwork and adjusting the schedule. As she locked up, she noticed something taped to the front window, a simple flyer. Maplewood Dog Fair, sponsored by Barrett Enterprises. Beneath that, in smaller print, organized by Sienna Clarke, her name in bold, it was the first time she'd seen it printed anywhere. And something about it, about being seen, not just helped, made her heart catch. She didn't call him. But she didn't take the flyer down either. Rain pelted the sidewalks in heavy sheets as Sienna rushed across Main Street, her shoes slipping against the slick pavement. She tugged the hood of her jacket tighter, shielding the bouquet of wildflowers cradled in one arm. She hadn't planned to be out this long, but the vendor at the farmer's market had insisted she take the last bouquet for free for the girl who makes all our dogs smell better than fresh bread. She hadn't been able to say no. As she reached the shop's back door, she stopped short. York was there. Waiting under the awning, umbrella in hand, his jacket soaked through. She stared at him for a full beat before unlocking the door. "If you're here about the fair, the vendor list is already finalized. I left copies in your assistant's inbox." "I'm not here about the fair," he said, stepping inside after her. "I'm here because I couldn't stop thinking about you." She hung her coat and set the flowers on the counter. "That's not my problem, I know," he said. "But I'm hoping you'll make it yours, just a little." She exhaled sharply and turned to face him. "York, you can't keep showing up like this. I'm not some puzzle you're trying to solve because you're bored." "I'm not bored, I'm terrified," he said, his tone quieter now. "Because I've never met someone who made me forget everything else, and I'm not used to wanting something I can't control." Sienna's jaw clenched. "You think that's supposed to make me feel special?" He walked closer, but not too close. "Careful." "No. But I think you should know I haven't touched a single project in the city since I got here. My board's threatening to vote me out if I don't come back soon, and I'm still here." She frowned. "That's your choice, not mine." "I know," he said again. "But I'd leave it all behind if you asked me to." Sienna blinked. "You'd give up Barrett Enterprises?" I'd hand over the reins tomorrow. She studied him, searching for the catch. There was none, just sincerity layered with something heavier. Why? She asked. Because I've built empires out of glass. I thought if I stacked them high enough, I'd feel something, but I never did. He paused. Until Thor dragged me into your shop. She turned away, heart pounding. York's voice softened. There's a part of me that's only alive when I'm here. When I'm with you. Sienna reached for the spray bottle, misting the counter even though it didn't need it. You say that now, but what happens when the novelty wears off, when you miss the penthouse and the board meetings? I don't miss them. I miss not knowing who I was supposed to be. With you, I don't have to perform, she glanced over. You're still performing. He stepped forward, this time almost close enough to touch. Then help me stop. She hesitated. Then, without looking at him, said, There's a charity event next week, local shelter's fundraiser. I'm working the adoption booth, he straightened. Do you want me there? No, she said. I want you to show up, he nodded once. I will. She didn't say anything else, but she didn't ask him to leave either. By the following Thursday, the town hall was transformed. String lights hung from the ceiling, casting golden reflections off the polished floor. Booths lined the perimeter, each hosted by a local sponsor. Sienna's table was covered in soft blankets and filled with sleeping puppies, all waiting for homes. She was crouched beside a crate, adjusting a water bowl when a warm voice spoke behind her. You need a volunteer, she looked up. York stood there in dark slacks and a fitted black sweater, sleeves rolled just enough to show his forearms. He held a donation envelope in one hand and in the other, a leash. Attached to the leash was Thor, now wearing a bright yellow vest that read, Adopt, Don't Shop. Sienna blinked. You dressed your dog for this, he insisted, York said, passing her the envelope. She opened it without a word. Inside was a check handwritten, dated today for $15,000. Payable to the Maplewood Animal Shelter. She stared at the number, then at him. He shrugged, then crouched beside one of the puppies. I figured if I couldn't adopt another one, I could at least help them find good homes. Sienna handed the envelope to the event coordinator and gestured toward the crate. You want to hold one? York didn't hesitate. He reached in and gently lifted a sleepy beagle mix, cradling it in his arms like it was made of glass. Do you ever think about what it's like for them? He asked. Going home with strangers, starting over. She looked at the puppy nestled in his arms. Sometimes, she said. But I think they're better at trusting than we are. York's eyes met hers. I wish I was better at that. You're trying, she said. That counts for something. He offered her the tiniest smile. Does it count enough to buy me another chance? She didn't answer. But she didn't look away, either. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of warm lights and wagging tails. York stayed the entire time holding puppies, greeting families, even cleaning up spilled kibble without complaint. When the event ended, he helped Sienna carry the crates back to her truck. As she slammed the tailgate shut, he leaned against the side. So, he said, how did I do? You didn't drop any dogs, she said. That's a good start. Would it be premature to ask if I've earned a coffee? She turned to face him. A real one, no assistants, no business agendas, just me. And you? She considered, then gave a small nod. Tomorrow, 8 a.m., don't be late. I won't, he said, and for once he didn't try to kiss her, didn't reach for more than she was willing to give. He just stood there, watching her climb into her truck, windshield foggy with condensation, before she drove off into the night. And for the first time, she didn't feel like she was driving away from something. She felt like she was heading straight toward it. The scent of cinnamon and espresso swirled through the air of the cafe as York stepped inside, brushing dampness from his coat. Sienna was already at a corner table, sipping from a ceramic mug, her hair tucked behind one ear as she read over a clipboard filled with appointment notes. She didn't look up when he approached, but she slid his coffee across the table precisely as he sat. You're 2 minutes early, she said. I didn't sleep, York replied, taking a seat. I wasn't sure if you'd actually show. I did say 8, she said, eyes still on the clipboard. I meant it. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. You always keep your word, she looked at him then. Yes, do you? I used to think I did, he admitted. Turns out I was mostly keeping other people's. She set the clipboard down. That's a heavy realization for a Tuesday morning. He gave a quiet laugh. I've had a lot of those lately. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like something waiting to unfold. Sienna reached into her bag and pulled out a folded flyer. I got a call from the shelter director this morning, she said. Every single dog from our booth got adopted, even the older ones. York's eyes widened. Seriously, she nodded. They said it was the most successful adoption push they've had in 5 years. He leaned back in his chair, visibly moved. I don't know what to say. You already said it, she replied. By showing up. York studied her, then said, Can I ask you something personal? Sienna hesitated, then nodded. Why did you come back to Maplewood? He asked. Really? She laced her fingers around her mug. After college, I stayed in Chicago for a while. I worked at a corporate grooming chain. Everything was fast appointments, clients, decisions. I barely remembered the dogs' names, just their numbers in the system. Then my aunt called. She said she was ready to retire and I could either let the shop go or come back and take it over. York's expression softened. So you chose this? I chose something real, she said. Something that mattered to me, even if it wasn't glamorous, he nodded slowly. You know, I used to think legacy was about scale, buildings, branding, but maybe it's about this. He gestured around them. The lives we touch in small ways, she tilted her head. That's poetic for someone who probably owns half of Midtown. Not anymore, he said, and her brow lifted. I resigned last night, York added. Formally, the board will announce it next week. I'm selling my shares to my cousin, who's been begging for a shot anyway. Sienna blinked. You're serious? I'm tired of skyscrapers, he said. And I don't want to look back 10 years from now and realize I built an empire but lost the only thing that ever felt honest. She stared at him, her voice quiet. What are you planning to do now? I thought I might stick around, he said. Help fund a new wing at the shelter. Maybe back your expansion plans if you'll let me. I never said I had expansion plans, she replied. You didn't have to, York said. I've seen the wait list. You're turning people away. You need a bigger space. She leaned back, watching him carefully. You're not trying to buy your way into this, are you? No, he said, but I am asking if I can build it with you. The cafe buzzed around them, but the moment between them was still, clear. Sienna looked down at her hands. I haven't let anyone in, not since my dad passed. Not really. I'm not asking for all of you right now, York said. Just a chance to be someone who doesn't make you feel like you're alone in it. She didn't respond immediately. Then, there's an empty storefront next to the shop. It used to be a bakery. I noticed, he said. Big windows. High ceilings. She met his eyes. I've been thinking about turning it into a daycare and training center, but it's a huge risk. I'd have to renovate, hire more staff, shift everything. I'll cover the costs, York said without hesitation. No strings. I believe in you. That's not the point, she replied. I need to know it's mine, he nodded. Then I'll help you build it, but it stays yours. She was quiet for a long moment, then she reached across the table and took his hand. I don't want to be rescued, she said. I want to be chosen. You were, York said. From day one. Later that week, the for lease sign in the bakery window came down. By the next, contractors were inside pulling up tile and measuring custom windows for a new storefront. Sienna stood at the center of the space, wearing a hard hat and holding a blueprint. York leaned in the doorway, sleeves rolled, clipboard in hand. They worked side by side, deciding on flooring, scheduling inspections, choosing colors. He never overstepped. He never pushed. He followed her lead, filling in the gaps when she needed him and stepping back when she didn't. They fought once over the placement of the reception counter but ended up laughing when they realized they were both wrong. When the grand opening came, the whole town showed up. There were balloons, fresh baked dog treats, and a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Sienna wore a navy jumpsuit and held the scissors with steady hands. York stood beside her, not in the spotlight, but just close enough to be part of it. After the ribbon fell, she turned to him. "I know what this is," she said, voice low. "It's not about money, it's not about buildings, it's about building a life, one we're proud of." He leaned in, lips brushing her temple. "With you, I already am." Later that evening, when the crowd had left and the lights inside the new center glowed soft and gold, York pulled a small box from his pocket and placed it in her hand. "No pressure," he said, "but I've already bought the plot behind the building. It's big enough for a house and a yard." Her eyes widened as she opened the box to reveal a simple, elegant ring, no fanfare, just a promise. She looked up at him, breath catching. "Yes," she whispered, "but I'm still in charge of the dogs," he laughed, pulling her close. "Always." And as they stood there, in the place they'd built together, surrounded by the sound of happy barking and the warmth of something real, Sienna realized she hadn't just taken over a shop. She'd found the kind of love that showed up, stayed, and built a future from the ground up. The scent of fresh cedar and warm paint still clung to the walls of the new facility as Sienna walked the length of the training room, clipboard in hand, the soft pads of paws echoing behind her. A golden retriever named Maple trotted obediently beside her, tail wagging as they passed the freshly installed agility course. The floor gleamed beneath their steps, sunlight filtering through the tall windows. York had insisted on installing floor-to-ceiling glass that made the whole room feel like it was holding its breath with possibility. York entered through the side door, his sleeves rolled to the elbow, tie long gone, his expression open in a way it never had been during those first few weeks. "The new soundproofing in the grooming suite passed the insulation test," he said. "No more barking bleeding through the walls." Sienna grinned, still walking. "So no more complaints during training sessions, no more excuses for anyone to avoid obedience class," he replied, stopping beside her. She knelt to adjust Maple's vest, then rose and looked at him, brushing her hands down her thighs. "Remember when you didn't know the difference between a slip lead and a martingale? I remember you laughing at me in front of 7 dogs and a 12-year-old who clearly knew better." "She still comes by," Sienna said. "Told me she thinks you're the most improved student we've had." York's eyes lit with something deeper than amusement. "That 12-year-old has excellent judgment." They stepped out of the training room into the reception area, where a sleek desk now stood in place of the old folding table. The woman behind it, Grace, one of the new hires, gave them a polite wave before returning to the oversized labradoodle sprawled at her feet. "I've been thinking," York said as he held the door open for Sienna. "We should host a summer program for kids, a week-long dog handling camp. Teach them responsibility, teamwork, give them a place to belong." Sienna blinked. "That's actually a great idea," he shrugged. "Figured we've got the space and the dogs and you've got the heart for it." She looked at him, her expression softening. "You're starting to sound like someone who wants to stay." "I already stayed," he said. "Now I want to grow." They crossed the lot to the bakery-turned-office space York had converted into a planning hub for the center. Inside, blueprints were pinned to the walls and whiteboards listed everything from upcoming adoption events to local school partnerships. A new intern, barely out of college, waved from the corner as she juggled a bundle of brochures. Sienna walked to the back where a door led to the private office they now shared. She turned to face him before going in. "You're not bored?" she asked. "Not even a little, not even a fraction," York said. "I used to think I needed skyscrapers to feel important. Now I see a well-balanced pit bull rolling over on command, and I feel like I built something better than all of it." She leaned against the doorframe. "You've changed." "So have you," he said. "You stopped doing everything alone." She nudged the door open and stepped inside. The room was cozy bookshelves lined with training manuals, framed photos of the first dogs adopted through the center, a corkboard filled with handwritten thank you notes. A single orchid sat on the windowsill, its blossoms a shade of pink that matched the sweater Sienna wore. York followed her in and closed the door behind him. "I meant to ask you something," he said, reaching into his coat. She turned, eyebrows raised. He pulled out a folded envelope and handed it to her. She opened it and froze. Inside was a certificate of incorporation. Clarke and Barrett Foundation for Animal Welfare. She looked up, stunned. "You did this." "We did this," York said. "The profits from my company shares they're going into the foundation. We'll fund shelters across the state, help small town centers like ours grow. And it'll be in your name, too." Her eyes filled, the tears sharp and fast. "Why?" "Because this is the legacy I want, something with your fingerprints all over it." She stepped forward and kissed him. No hesitation this time, no walls. Just the full, fierce weight of everything she'd held back for too long. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "You know what this means, right? That we're officially business partners? That you're never getting rid of me?" His hands slid around her waist. "That's the plan." Later that night, under a wide summer sky, they stood on the back porch of the small house York had built behind the center. It wasn't sprawling or ornate, it was warm. Wooden beams, soft lighting, wrap-around windows, a kitchen big enough for two. A yard big enough for 20 dogs, and a hammock just far enough from the house to feel like a secret. Sienna leaned against the railing, watching the dogs chase fireflies in the grass. "Do you miss the city?" "Only when I run out of your coffee beans," he said. She laughed, the sound light and real. "I think I finally believe this is real." York took her hand. "It's not just real, it's ours." She looked at him. "You ready for what comes next?" He glanced at the stars. "If it's with you." "Absolutely." They kissed again under the quiet hush of the open sky, the kind of kiss that didn't need anything flashy or dramatic. It was the kind that said, "I'm here, I see you, I'm not going anywhere." The next morning, the sun rose over the center, spilling gold across the dewy grass. The first staff member arrived to find Sienna already outside with 2 dogs, coffee in one hand, whistle in the other. York emerged from the house moments later, barefoot, mug in hand, grinning as he joined her on the grass. "Training starts in 10, she called. He saluted. "Yes, ma'am." As the dogs gathered, tails wagging and the sounds of a new day echoed through the trees, York reached for her hand again. No words this time, just a shared glance. They didn't need to say it. They had built a life equal parts chaos, purpose, and love, rooted in trust. Grown with time, and it had only just begun.